Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of Art Travel Cast. Today's topic is the big comeback of the 80s.
First, let's talk about the characteristics of the 80s style. First, colorful and neon accents, intense colors, including neons, pink, orange, green, were common in both clothing and interior design.
In fashion, definitely oversized, clothes were often big and loose, like wide shoulders and jackets, miniskirts, and wide legged trousers.
Strong makeup and hairstyles. Women wore bold makeup with a clear emphasis on the eyes and lips, and hairstyles were voluminous, using clutch curls or mangoes high hairstyles.
Sporty style inspiration from sports fashion and clothing, such as tracksuits, has become popular both in everyday fashion and on fashion catwalk.
Technology and futuristic elements. The rise in popularity of computers, videotapes, and electronics permeated fashion, introducing new, more technical materials and designs.
Okay, pop music and culture. 80s fashion was strongly connected to music culture, especially pop, rock, and new wave, with iconic figures like Madonna, Michael Jackson, and Prince.
The emphasis of individualism and experimentation, there was no one correct style, but rather creativity and the possibility of mixing different trends such as punk, glam, or preppy style mattered.
Okay, now we know what the 80s are all about. Let's talk about art. The 80s are a return to figuration and pop art. After the avant garde experiments of the 60s and 70s, the 80s brought a return to more recognizable forms inspired by pop art, comics, and popular art.
Important trends of the decade included neo design, neo expressionism, graffiti art, and digital art. The art of the 80s was characterized by great diversity, combining different media styles and themes. Artists were characterized by individualism and experimentation. The growing interest in new technologies, including computers and video, had a major impact on the creation of art. Works in the fields of video art, multimedia installation, and computer generated art appeared.
The graffiti movement, initially associated with urban subculture, has gained popularity worldwide. Artists such as Jean-Michel Basquiat and Kit Haring have had a major influence on street and contemporary art.
Art in the 80s often addressed political themes, such as the Cold War, apartheid, and the civil rights movement. Artists began to engage with social issues, expressing opposition to oppressive systems.
In the 80s, art was still dominated by elements related to mass culture, such as advertising, television, pop music. Artists often transformed pop culture icons into works of art.
The 1980s were a time of development for the art market, with dynamic auctions, commercialization of art, and emergence of galleries that became important institution promoting contemporary artists.
Artists from 80s often used provocation, controversy, and challenging traditional artistic norms. An example would be Andy Warhol and his approach to mass production of art.
In the 1980s, alternative art spaces developed, such as independent galleries, as well as artists creating within independent movements, outside the mainstream of the commercial art market.
Art is not only visual art, but also music. The 80s were a time of dominance of pop music, with artists such as Michael Jackson, Madonna, Whitney Houston, Prince, and Cyndi Lauper gaining international popularity.
The advent of synthesizers, drum machines, and other electronic instruments changed the sound of music. These technologies became the basis for many genres of music, including new wave, synthpop, and electropop.
In reaction to disco music, genres such as new wave, e.g., Depeche Mode, Talking Heads, and post-punk, e.g., The Crew, Joy Division, emerged, which combined elements of rock with electronica.
The 80s were also a time of growth for hip hop. Hip hop was starting to gain popularity with key figures like Ram DMC, LL Cool J, Grandmaster Flash, and Public Enemy, allowing the foundation for the genre for decades to come.
The 80s were also a time of dominance of hard rock and heavy metal with bands such as Metallica, AC/DC, Guns N' Roses, Queen, and Bon Jovi.
This was the time of the rise in popularity of music videos. MTV, which was founded in 1981, played a key role in promoting artists and their music videos, becoming the main tool for promoting music in the 80s.
The music of 80s was closely tied to a certain aesthetic, colorful clothes, big hair, makeup, as well as bold music videos and live performances that emphasized the drama and energy of the years.
The 80s saw the release of many iconic albums, such as Michael Jackson's Thriller, Madonna's Like a Virgin, Prince's Purple Rain, and U2's The Joshua Tree. The music of the 80s had a huge impact on global culture, not only in the United States, but also in Europe and around the world.
Another important field of art is, of course, cinema. The 80s were a time when action films, often with superheroes or tough heroes, became extremely popular. Examples are Rambo and Die Hard.
In that period, actors like Arnold Schwarzenegger, Terminator, Sylvester Stallone, Rambo, Rocky, Bruce Willis, Die Hard, started building their careers. There were also a big comedy boom. Comedy films, both slapstick and more intellectual, were a huge hit. Among the most popular titles were Ghostbuster, Back to the Future, The Breakfast Club.
The 80s were also a time of great development of science fiction and fantasy cinema. Examples E.T., Star Wars, The Empire Strikes Back, Blade Runner, The Terminator.
Horror films, including the famous slasher films, have become some of the most watched films. Nightmare on Elm Street, Friday the 13th, and The Shining are just some of the most important productions.
The 80s were also a time when music in films played a key role. A great example is Flashdance, Top Gun, Dirty Dancing, films with unforgettable soundtracks.
In the 80s, technology and special effects began to reach a higher level. Star Wars, Return of the Jedi, Throne, The Abyss were groundbreaking visually.
The films of the 80s created pop culture icons such as Indiana Jones, The Goonies, Back to the Future, The Karate Kid.
While this is more of a nonsense trend, films like Superman Second and Batman kicked off the interest in comic book movie adaptation.
Art is also fashion, and in the 80s, it was particularly interesting. It was a period full of bold choices, various trends, and experiments.
Large, baggy clothes were very popular both in men's and women's fashion. e.g., baggy jackets, t-shirts, sweaters, and bright colors, especially neon shades of pink, green, orange, and yellow, were very fashionable in casual and sportswear.
Leather jackets, skirts, and trousers were part of both punk and classic fashion. Leggings, especially neon colored ones, often worn with long shirts and tunics.
Biker jackets, distinctive leather jackets with metal elements, became a symbol of punk fashion, but also casual. When it comes to accessories, large sunglasses, white belts, statement jewelry, bandanas, and flat caps dominated.
Multicolored patterns have appeared, a combination of different patterns and colors on clothing, e.g., geometrics, shapes, strips, checks.
Sneakers have dominated casual fashion, especially Nike and Adidas models.
Punk influences, e.g., dark colors, ripped clothes, studs, and new wave style, sideswept hair, pastel colors were clearly present in street fashion.
High hairstyles, so-called bubble hair, and asymmetrical cuts were characteristic, especially for women. The fashion of the 80s is synonymous with bold decision and freedom in self-expression.
The last one is, of course, design. In the 80s, geometry and abstraction returned. Frequent use of sharp shapes, lines, triangles, squares, and another geometric forms.
Futuristic themes appeared, inspiration from technology, computers, and cybernetics, which manifested itself in design related to electronic and art.
Pop art inspired the design. The colorful graphic patterns and elements of pop culture from the 60s were transformed for the 80s.
The use of modern materials such as plastic and metal, with often simple but modern forms. The style was functional but also full of energy.
Typography, dynamic fonts, often with sharp edges, using effects such as shadows, gradients, and outlines.
The design was inspired by 80s television, films, and music, especially in the context of album covers and movie posters.
The Memphis aesthetic, a style that dominated 1980s design characterized by bold colors, patterns, and asymmetry, often using popular motifs such as polka dots, strips, and zigzags.
One last point about the design. Strong contrast, black and white, bright colors, and more subdued ones, which created a dynamic but harmonious visual effect.
Okay, it's time to talk about why the 80s aesthetic is coming back. Many people who grew up in the 80s are now 30, 50 years old and are eager to return the aesthetics of their youth. Nostalgia is becoming a key factor in bringing back trends from that period.
Many pop culture phenomena are currently directed towards the past. The growing interest in older decades, especially in 80s, is the result of retromania or the tendency to draw inspiration from years gone by.
Another reason is the influence of media and pop culture. 80s movies, series, and music are getting a new life thanks to streaming platforms like Netflix and YouTube. Productions like Stranger Things or Drive remind us of the aesthetics of that decade and reintroduce them to the general public.
The 80s saw the first personal computers and technological innovation. Today, in the digital era, design based on nostalgia for old technological aesthetics is gaining popularity, especially in visual art and computer graphics.
The 80s fashion and design were dominated by bright colors, geometric patterns, and oversized shapes. These features are coming back because they are perceived as fresh and expressive in the context of contemporary, more minimalistic trends.
The 80s were the time of iconic artists such as Madonna, Michael Jackson, David Bowie, and Prince. Their music and images are still a source of inspiration for a new generation of artists and designers. Modern pop and electronic music stars often refer to this era.
The 80s fashion, which is characteristic accents such as neon clothes, bomber jackets, wide shoulders, is currently being reinterpreted by contemporary fashion designers. New versions of these clothes appear on the catwalks, which gives them new life in current collections.
Postmodernism, which developed in the 80s, is now being revived in art and design. Works referring to this aesthetic, with its colorful, often surreal forms, are returning in modern galleries and art projects. These points indicate how strongly the 80s have influenced contemporary culture, both in terms of aesthetics and musical, artistic, and fashion trends, and that fashion is constantly coming full circle. Although now we are probably slowly approaching the moment when everything will become fashionable at the same time. Okay, we end today's episode with this reflection. Thank you for being with us and see you next week.